we've seen Kristen Stewart, the actress, for quite some time now. And now I got to see what Kristen Stewart, the director, would be like with her debut feature film, The Chronology of Water, which was the 5th film I saw at this year's Melbourne International Film Festival. Let's get into it. Honestly, this film could have been anything. This was the Australian premiere for this film, and I believe the first screening of this movie since it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. So I didn't quite know what to expect, apart from seeing a disclaimer in the MIFF description about how this contains themes of sexual abuse against children. So I knew that this was definitely going to be a heavy watch. But honestly, Kristen Stewart's eye as a filmmaker, I have never seen before. I know she's made quite a few short films, but I haven't seen any of them. So this was my first glimpse of seeing what she can do as a director. And I think the film is very hit or miss. It definitely shows signs of great potential for Kristen Stewart, that she has a great eye behind the camera. But there are definitely some clear flaws here that hold this film back quite significantly in moments. But I firstly just want to really appreciate the boldness of such a directorial debut. You can tell so many frames of this movie feel incredibly personal to Kristen Stewart, and to come out with such a bold, hard-hitting film that doesn't shy away from very touchy subject matter. It's quite an interesting swing to take on your very first feature film. But I appreciate those kinds of swings, and I think, yeah, at moments, Kristen Stewart pulls off a very emotionally charged film that had me feeling some kind of way during its runtime. As I mentioned before, this film touches on child sexual abuse and how, as that person grows up, how such trauma can infect every single part of their life and make them such a damaged person that goes through so much. Effects like this and this kind of trauma need to be taken as seriously as possible, because the things that this protagonist goes through are extremely heavy and not to be taken lightly at all. I would say that Stewart's direction evokes a very similar energy to that of someone like Andrea Arnold, who has directed films like American Honey and Bird. She's a director that can capture perspective really well and touches on something that feels so real and authentic. It feels like a capsule of a time in someone's life in a way that not a lot of filmmakers can capture. And at moments, at the very best of this film, Kristen Stewart does remind me of someone like Andrea Arnold with this direction. The way that she utilizes a lot of extreme close-ups and narration and giving you enough details to know where this trauma is coming from, what happened to this character, without straight up showing it in the most graphic and maybe disrespectful fashion as possible. And she creates such a well-rounded character here that is performed brilliantly by Imogen Poots. I think that this is career best work in terms of her performance in this film. I think it's so powerful and can be so emotionally charged. This character is someone that you deeply sympathize with, and when you see her go on such self-destructive tendencies and follow a string of behavior that disrupts relationships and makes her just not understand who she is at all, is absolutely heartbreaking to watch unfold on screen. But Imogen Poots plays this three-dimensional character so incredibly well, and at times the film can be written very well to reflect a lot of the tragedy that is happening to this character and how such abuse has just permeated throughout her entire life. I think the way that the film was edited was very interesting. At times the film was presented in a non-linear fashion, and it kind of creates certain pictures in your head that the film builds towards, and when it finally hits that picture again, it provides all the context and feels even more heartbreaking than what it was when Kristen Stewart first presented that image to you. Visually, I think the film looks great. It's shot on 16mm, I believe, so it's very grainy. It has just such a great aesthetic to it. It feels tactile and authentic to this kind of movie. And with the kind of aspect ratio that it's playing with, it once again reminded me of Andrea Arnold's latest feature, Bird, where it feels like something that was picked out of the ground, and it just feels so real and emotional. And I love those aspects to this movie. I think there's such potential in what Kristen Stewart can do behind the camera. There's many characters that Imogen Poots meets along the way in her journey to self-discovery and trying to find peace in her life. And there are some great supporting performances that play out throughout the movie because of it. One, like Jim Belushi, who I think was surprisingly great, and I wasn't really expecting him to be in this movie, but the scenes that he's in were very powerful, and in his limited amount of screen time, he adds such energy to the movie that I think it needed. I think that he was wonderful working alongside Poots, and seeing what happened to that character can be just as devastating as anything else that happens in this movie. But now I think it's time to go into the flaws of this movie, which I do think there are quite a few, and some can be quite significant. It almost made this film completely nosedive for me, such as I think the writing let this down quite a bit. I think Kristen Stewart, the director, is a lot further in her progression than Kristen Stewart, the writer. There are many tendencies in the writing here that feel very much film studenty or even unbearable indie character. If you've seen those TikToks, it's kind of like that at moments. There is a metaphor around water in this movie that I don't think works at all, and I think it almost makes this a parody of itself in moments. Not all the time, but for a film that is tackling such weighty subject matter as child sexual abuse and touching on themes of incest and how that can just damage someone so significantly. This is shit that people have gone through. And when you're capturing a certain trauma that so many people have gone through, you need to get certain things right. And there are just some moments there that undercut some of that. I don't think it makes it look disrespectful or anything. I think that the portrayal here is very earnest, and what Kristen Stewart's going for is very bold, and I do appreciate the empathy in which she's showing within the film. I don't think it ends up being disrespectful or anything, but to have some of these kind of pretentious and weak metaphors presented throughout the film, it undercuts a lot of the drama that is happening here, and that can be very unfortunate for a film like this. I also think that this film plays out to be way too long. I mean, far too long. There was a sweet spot in this movie where I thought that if it ended at this point, very great. It built towards a very satisfying conclusion that does leave this character in a place that I think is quite interesting and just a good way of closing this movie. And I was honestly completely done with the film at that point. Not in a way where I was sick of it, but it just felt like it had built towards its conclusion and I was ready for it to finish. And then it hard cuts and it goes to another chapter in this film. And when I saw that chapter pop up, I was like, I'm just almost checked out completely. I'm mentally exhausted from this. I've had enough of this, and I almost felt a collective sigh from the audience when that happened. I don't think I was the only one that felt that exhaustion. And that final chapter, I did not need at all. What it was doing and what it was going for, it felt very forced within the narrative to try and find a different kind of ending, but I could have surmised as much from what had happened in the previous chapter. It just felt like over-explaining and just giving you a definitive, this is what's going to happen with this character. And as I said, I don't think I needed it at all, and I think Kristen Stewart would have been better off in trusting the audience to make their own conclusions here. Overall, I think The Chronology of Water is a good movie that could have been great, and I think at its best, this movie is very great and reminds me of a film like Precious, which once again touches on very weighty subject matter. I think a film like Precious is far more consistent and a far better portrayal of this kind of abuse. But The Chronology of Water is a very solid attempt. It's not a film I really want to rewatch due to its subject matter, and also the fact that I think it is an exhausting watch and not for the ways that it's trying to intend. I think it's a solid debut feature from Kristen Stewart. The fact that she's able to get such great performances out of her actors and is able to provide some very powerful images on the screen and really be a great director. All of these things check a lot of boxes that make me excited to see what she can do next as a filmmaker, but I think she has a lot of work to do as a writer. And as a score, I'm going to give The Chronology of Water my basic recommendation rating of a 3.5 out of 5, because I do think it's a solid movie that is worth a watch if you can stomach this kind of subject matter and are at all interested in seeing a movie that explores abuse in such a way. If this is something that you have gone through personally, I don't think that you should watch this movie, because you're going to get confronted with something very heavy that might be deeply affecting, and I just want to provide that warning for you just in case. But I do think that this film is worthy of a recommendation. And those are my thoughts towards The Chronology of Water. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you haven't, is this something that's on your radar? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I did hear a little bit of buzz about this out of Cannes, but not too many people currently are talking about it. So I'd love to hear where you are with this in terms of your excitement or anticipation of this movie. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.